With that, I'm pleased now to turn to our main program and introduce a longtime member of our club who's another accomplished Rotarian. And I hope, this is self-evident to our current members, but I hope our guests are picking up on this theme. It's amazing what our membership does both for our club, but what else they do in the rest of their lives and livelihoods. So along those same lines, I'm very pleased to introduce Steve Crandall. Steve's a serial entrepreneur. He's a strategic thinker. He's a community activist. He's just another Rotarian overachiever. And he's been heading up Promotion Holdings, which is a full range of new media and technology solutions to corporate, nonprofit, and legal industry clients. They combine technology with talent to deliver incredible results. And if this sounds a bit familiar to you, it's because Steve's been a key part of doing video capture for our club for at least a decade or more now. And with that, I'm pleased to turn the main podium over to Steve for today's long program. Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. I just need to clarify briefly. My military experience was picking up and moving every year or so until I graduated from high school. I like to say I had 18 duty stations, but that was only the permanent ones, didn't include the temporary. I think most of you know the real military hero in my family is my father, Bruce Crandall, who is a Medal of Honor recipient. So I do not want to take any claim around anything other than being as good an Army brat as I possibly could. So thank you. So today, the trick is to think inside the box. And I know that sounds weird, but really it's the Zoom box, right? How do we convert all the things we're doing into something that can fit into a box this size and still be effective at what we're trying to do? Success really means learning how to identify your core competencies and reimagining what that delivery looks like. As CEO of Promotion Holdings, which includes Prolumina corporate communications, Prolumina litigation communications, and Byers and Anderson court reporting and legal video, we've been providing remote solutions for decades. We've helped companies in the retail and wholesale, legal, including depositions, trials, educational institutions, nonprofits, and corporate and professional organizations, all in verticals that we've successfully transitioned to online delivery. And here I will show you a little fun thing where we don't have to do the whole screen sharing. It's a little quicker to be able to switch between things. So give me 1 second here. And so you should be able to still pick me up. Are you seeing me? You are. Great. So are you seeing the image of the court?
We're seeing the video facilities.
Huh. Sorry, we'll try that differently then. Yeah, you must still be pinned, Jeff, because that's who I'm only seeing you, but that's the way it is. So the image I was trying to show you, and I can still show it to you via regular screen sharing, but basically it's one of the early trials that we did around FinFin. It was one of the very first trials that was ever presented via broadcast. That's what they called it back then. It was what you'd really consider more like a closed circuit. And that was done in the FinFin trial. So again, the courtroom setup looked like a broadcast studio. Nothing like what you see today, lots of big, deep monitors. This group is old enough to remember what a deep CRT looked like, cathode ray tubes, and not skinny little things that the kids see. They look at those and they wonder what the heck they are. So a whole different kind of experience and world. Before we get into best practices and case studies, I'd like to share some of the benefits that our clients have seen using remote solutions compared to what I call pre-COVID delivery. While many people talk about when we get back to normal, I'm not sure that we'll ever get back to normal. In fact, I believe that this new normal is really what we can expect going forward. And I'll share some of the reasons why, not just because of the issues around health and safety, because companies, as they've started to use this technology and started to begin to be more comfortable with the technology, they're discovering that other than health and safety, which are absolutely critical, that the benefits that they get beyond that are pretty significant. So some of those benefits can include things like positive factors such as increasing comfort with the technology, cost savings, reduced stress, including traffic. You have that one? Not today. They used to, right? Not too long ago. But traffic was a pain, parking was a pain. I remember, parking in downtown was getting up between $30 and $40 to park somewhere for a day. I know the Columbia Tower, it was that. I'm from old enough ago that I can remember when parking meters were 25 cents and you could park all day for a couple bucks. And then some of the other things that people have just discovered are really helping them to use the technology in a way that has other benefits that they might not have anticipated when they first got into this. So let's look at one example. A lot of our clients in the legal verticals, who are doing a lot of work with them, that prior to COVID, an attorney in Seattle who might make $300 an hour, if their office was in the Columbia Tower and they had to commute up to a deposition up at, say, Amazon, and it was scheduled to start at 9 a.m., so right in the middle of rush hour, before the pandemic, it could have taken 45 minutes to an hour to actually get that far from downtown, the Columbia Tower, all the way up into Amazon headquarters up in the regrade. And an hour each way, hassle with parking, dealing with all of those things. And then again, equally problematic getting back. And again, this has nothing to do with COVID. This was the reality of pre-COVID life in Seattle. I know occasionally I would have to get down to the south end of town from my office, across from the Amazon headquarters, and it would take sometimes longer than an hour to go really what was less than 20 blocks. And if anybody ever tried to do that, you knew it was not pleasant. So if you add that up for lawyers, that could be $600 just to commute in the morning to the deposition location up in the Amazon area, the headquarters area, and then having to get back again another hour. So what I can tell you that attorneys now have become incredibly familiar with the technology, doing remote depositions. They've begun to realize that they can save $600 when we return to regular on-site work by switching and continuing to use remote depositions. And that they can do that from the comfort of their own office. For a profession that bills in 6-minute increments, 6 minutes. It's one of the reasons I never practiced traditional law. I don't know if y'all knew that. I was a lawyer by training, and the bar sent me a congratulations letter that I had been a member for 30 years, and I promptly resigned. It was their mistake. They should have let me know how old I was and that I had actually been doing this for 30 years. But 6-minute increments is, those folks are really conscious of giving up 2 hours of their billable day to sit in a car or on a bus to try to get from one end of town to the other. Zoom itself, a lot of people don't like the technology because they don't feel comfortable that it allows them to connect with people. And, I heard that early on. And it is difficult, right? We do not get the turnout that we did in person in our club. It's a lot harder for us to, have those kinds of one-on-ones that we could have. A new member, somebody that we wanted to speak to and haven't seen in a while. It's just a little harder when we have everybody kind of sharing the same box. But what I found, and it's really interesting, is that for me personally, that Zoom can be an incredibly powerful tool for connecting with employees, members, customers, and even prospects. Prior to the widespread adoption of Zoom meetings, we were lucky to get anywhere near our whole team at our quarterly offsites that we had. People were just too busy during the day and trying to get everyone offsite. We could really only do it quarterly. And even then, we didn't necessarily get all the folks we wanted. What we found now since the crisis, that we've been holding regular weekly all hands on Fridays. And the surprise to me that sort of was even a revelation to me was that I saw more of my employees on our Friday meetings than I would have ever seen in our quarterlies. It was pretty much, particularly during the times when it was slower, when it was the most critical, to make sure that we were connecting with our employees, that they had an opportunity to talk to leadership, that we just had the ability to sort of test the pulse of everyone and make sure that everyone was okay. Our objective was to not lay anyone off, and to keep everyone on and bring everyone back. We were effective at doing that. But I will tell you that the first month or so, when the revenue just dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped, it was terrifying. And more so for the staff, I think, than me, because I felt like we had a path. And I will tell you that, frankly, what really bothered me the most was constantly worrying about my employees. I used to get really emotional because I worried about whether they'd be able to, make their mortgage payments, whether they'd be able to, be able to provide the things they needed for their family, the basics. And I'd never felt that way before. And so for me, being able to see their faces, being able to see them all together, being able to have those open dialogues was so incredibly powerful. And it really served a purpose that you couldn't have gotten doing insight meetings where people were off doing work and other things. We were able to keep everything kind of scheduled around that. And again, it's something that you wouldn't necessarily have expected. One of the things that we also, anybody who knows me knows I'm a bit of a jokester, and I have a sense of humor. And within our office, we have so many little, in the marriage, I call them silly little marital rituals or slimmers. They're the things that you have with your spouse where you, over the years, have developed those silly things that you do that nobody else does and that you hope to God nobody ever finds out about. But they're things that bond you. And we do the same thing at work. We believe in those kinds of rituals. We believe it's a powerful way to connect. And again, for us personally, having the ability to continue some of those. And so one of the things that we developed was the practice of every single meeting. I will not take the credit for it. It was one of my folks who came up with it. But once he did it the first time, it became the way we closed all of our all hands meetings, and that is the group hug. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that, but it's basically in our meetings where every single person in our office reaches out and says, here's the hug. It's not a real hug, certainly doesn't give you that kind of intimacy that you get when you actually have physical contact with people, but it was great. Exactly, Nancy. All right, group hug, everybody. I got to play along. All right. Don't you feel better? See, it actually works. But again, those are the kinds of things that, in terms of leadership, in terms of being able to connect with your people, they're critical, right? They're the kinds of things that we need to be able to do as leaders so that our people feel, and particularly when they were also worried about their mortgages and food and those things, that we were able to connect with them and they knew that we cared. And it's a virtual hug, but it's better than no hug. So now let's talk a little bit about some of the best practices in terms of the technology. And I'm not going to try to get too deep into the technology itself, because that can get very, very complicated and is specific to individuals. And so I want to talk just briefly about some basics that we do. One is, and I know they've disabled to show only people that video, but one of the things for those who logged in early was they would have noticed that there was a login called Steve Failsafe. And it's something that we do routinely at particularly mission critical types of events. So what we do is that in a normal meeting where it's mission critical, for example, if we're the presenter or we are the manager or the executive of the company, maybe you're doing a presentation, we try to make sure, particularly if you're the host, has anybody had the experience where you're the host, you're running the meeting, and then all of a sudden your internet goes down or your computer freezes or your software freezes? And anybody who's had that experience, if you're the host, you know exactly what happens, right? What happens is everyone else gets kicked off, unless you're using an account that has the co-host and that. But if you're using a typical pro account and not using one of the webinars, you actually can end up kicking the entire meeting off. Everyone goes off. And at that point, you just pray that everybody comes back. I'm not that much of an optimist. I actually worry that, if we've lost people, that you will have, hopefully most of them come back, but the reality is that a certain portion won't. So what the failsafe does is I've logged in under a separate laptop. You can use an iPad, heck, you can even use an iPhone. And because all you need as the host is to have some device that you can assign that host to once you get going, so that if you fail, if your hardware fails, your software, your internet goes down, the meeting doesn't end. And all you've got to do is go over to your other device and literally turn that on. And it's, and I don't know if I'll pop up here in this. Once I've done that, probably not. But if I had fallen off, I would have been able to go to that laptop and immediately still be connected, right? Which is a wonderful way to make sure that you're not killing the whole meeting. It's probably one of the most essential and elemental things that you can do, because losing the meeting and having everyone kicked off is never good. And again, really simple, second laptop or device. You need to use a second email account, because anybody who's tried to open a second log into a meeting with the same email, what you'll discover is that you will immediately, it'll kick you off, because Zoom says, oh, you're already using that account, you're already logged into the meeting, so I'm assuming you want to switch to this one, and it will shut that down. So you have to have a separate email account, you have to have a separate device, and then you just assign the host, and then you're fail-safe, you're bulletproof, basically. And it means that your meeting will continue without interruption. Really basic thing, but it's one of the most important. One of the other things that we do, depending on the circumstance, is everyone here is familiar with breakout rooms. When we do like our big meetings or something like that, if we have our annual strategic planning meeting where we have all our employees, and maybe we've invited someone, to speak on generational issues. So we invited Ana Liata to come and to speak to us for an hour. Now, the problem is, often during those kinds of in-person meetings, the management team will, at some point, decide that, over lunch or brief break, they'll get together really quickly. They will talk about what they think needs to be addressed, the things they've heard, so that when they come back into the meeting, they're more productive and the meeting can actually have move forward a lot faster. It's really hard to do that inside of Zoom. People who've done breakout rooms know you could select to go into a breakout room. The problem with that is that if you have a speaker and all your employees are there, I'm assuming that some of them might notice that the entire leadership team is gone. That is not something we want to communicate. The reality is we're doing a sidebar, but in order to do that, you can't just use that second device to log into the same meeting. What you have to do is have a second Zoom account. So you have your other device, you set up your own Zoom meeting, so you literally have two meetings going. So I have this meeting where I'm talking to employees, and then when the presenter comes in, we can go, turn off our video, turn off our audio, and immediately we're all the leadership team or the other folks can be in this other room. We also use that, interestingly enough, not just for leadership team meetings during an event where there's an opportunity for that kind of break. We also use it for green rooms in live events where we might, if we have people coming into the meeting throughout the day or the weekend, rather than having them come in and then discover that they're having problems with their audio or their internet, we have this separate green room set up, and we have them log into there first. And then that way we can problem solve any issues they might have, determine if there's any issues with their internet connection, their audio, whatever. So we're not doing it inside of the main meeting. Completely independent meeting that we're able to do that with. But again, really, really valuable, and certainly much better than telescoping to all of your employees that the entire leadership team has stepped away. Again, simple thing, but really powerful and gives you a lot more control, particularly over complex meetings. I was talking to Carolyn earlier and Mariah. I said, I have this way of hacking the screen sharing, so I don't have to do that. And of course, then it didn't work. So I'm guessing they sabotaged me. Kidding, Carolyn. But there's ways with that. Again, it requires a bit more technology, a bit more complexity around what you're trying to do, but it makes it relatively straightforward to be able to share your screen and then bring in other input. So what I use, and it's an A10, it's a Blackmagic A10 Mini. They're a few $100s, and they give you the ability to plug 4 different things in, and it treats whatever that is as another camera input. So think about that. It's a nice way if you want to have a separate view and be able to cut to a different view. You want to cut to PowerPoint that's running elsewhere that's already running. You don't want to have to use screen sharing to do it. So let's say you're moving between PowerPoint and PDF or a number of different programs. Inside of screen sharing, of course, you're going to have to close that out, go back in, pick the new window or the application. And so it's really clunky, whereas with the using something like a multi-input switcher, you have the ability to immediately switch from item to item. It's great. I think it's a great thing. One of the other things that I do, and it creates certain sort of pizzazz factor or wow factor, I always tell everybody in our office that when you see the Brady Bunch window, this is a really big Brady Bunch, but when you see that, what I want is that our team has the best looking video in the meeting. That's important to us because obviously, that's part of our business. It's what we do. And we want to make sure that other folks know that. Now, for anybody who has tried to do the green screen without a green screen, or who has tried to do the green screen without good lighting, they will tell you, and Jeff, you look great, they will tell you that it really is almost worse. I think you've all seen it. You got great hair, Jeff. I'm wearing a hat. But what you'll see is that, it just doesn't look good on most people. It's very, very difficult without the proper lighting and without a green screen to make that work. So in order to use it, you want to have good lighting. You want to have a green screen set up. You want to go to at least through that level of information. And I do it for a lot. And what I tell you I will do is that for me, a big piece of this is using it specifically as I'm talking to a particular group or to a particular organization. I will switch my background so that it is relevant to that organization. Depending on who I'm talking to, if I want to appear authentic, I might be down in my family room, alternatively maybe out in the garden. Again, depending on the circumstance, what I'm trying to project, all of these things make a difference in terms of what I'm projecting out to the folks who are watching it, right? If I want people to be relaxed and calm, maybe I'll do the garden. If I want to appear authentic, I might do the family room. But if I'm doing something where we're trying to talk to somebody who does live theater or is trying to move to a virtual model for that, we might show something from an in-person shoot at the Fifth Avenue. If we're talking to attorneys, we might show the work that we were doing at the Washington Supreme Court before the shutdown. It's those kinds of things. And so, for example, when we were talking to Union Bay, which I'll talk about later, we showed one of our Wolford shoots that we did with the Wolford models. And then most recently, we did the NSA, the National Speakers Association Influence Conference, which was 3 days 2 weeks ago. And so again, for that, it's not a big deal. I wasn't being featured. I wasn't speaking. These are all national level speakers who make a lot of money. But again, what this says is that I'm engaged with what they're doing, and I want them to know that. The flip side that I kind of enjoy is sometimes you can have a little power trip. I was a member of the bar for 30 years. I always wanted to be a judge, and so now I am. But again, this is stuff that's humorous. One of our clients that we do a lot of work for is Seattle Deposition Reporters, where there you go, where we will actually do depositions for them because they haven't got all the remote stuff figured out. And so for them, for example, I created a custom backdrop that brands their firm so that when I'm doing a project for them, or any of my staff are, that they can see that we are committed to them, not just in the sense of other independents, but we're taking it that extra step. And I can't remember who's talking about PR and those folks. This is one of the best PR that you can do. It's just a great example of making this work, talking about maybe the work that you've done for Starbucks. Just any kind of thing you want, you have the ability to make that relevant.
So Steve, this has been great content, and we're just about to transition to Q&A. But we had so many different events in 2020 that I've taken your advice to heart. And so when the aliens finally arrive, I've got my background as the starship, the bridge of the original Enterprise, so I can relate with them and have a meaningful conversation. A couple of things as we go to Q&A here. Steve, you mentioned some of the equipment that you recommend. So if you want in the chat, just maybe type in, here's the brand of multi-switcher that I think the average Rotarian might be interested in. Here's a recommendation on lighting or say on microphone. anything you're comfortable sharing that you think would be of value to the audience. And as you're thinking about that, one of the questions from that Virginia brought up has to do with security associated with using these different tools. Like she's concerned, you know, if is her Zoom password for sale on the dark web? Has Zoom was sort of dinged early on for not really having good security. They've tried to quickly pivot, and yet I think they still have some work to do.
Yeah, that absolutely. I will tell you that early on there were concerns. There was the FBI memo that came out. It was the school that was hacked. I will tell you that even though that happened and it was genuine and people refer to Zoom bombing, I can tell you that before Zoom bombing, there was Skype bombing. So the bombing has existed for quite a while. The things that Zoom has done to improve the security, I think many of you are aware of it. We have standard practices around things where, for example, we force people to go into the waiting room so nobody can come in. We limit sharing to just the host. So other people can't just throw things up. You can't accidentally have somebody pick the wrong graphic that nobody wants to see. So they've done those kinds of things. They've improved the encryption from end to end. You know, if you are using the same password, if you are using you know, one of your email accounts that's very public and you've used that password and that email combination before, that's probably right now your greatest risk is the personal risk that you're introducing. Pretty much now the security around the things they're doing, like making people go into waiting rooms, making people be admitted, limiting screen sharing until it's explicitly shared. All of those things really make it quite secure.
And a follow-on to that, you mentioned your work with the courts regarding providing, you know, video. Can you speak to how you are able to do that and yet sort of meet needs associated with privacy, you know, foster kids as an example, other security issues, sometimes, you know, physician privacy issues, therapist issues, that type of thing?
Yeah, I will tell you that most physicians' offices and folks like that will deal with, they often have their own proprietary system for telemedicine. They're not generally using Zoom, and the reason for that is because they have all of the HIPAA requirements and the PPI, the personally identifiable information. And while Zoom is adequate, HIPAA really requires that not only is the meeting itself secured and meets all of the HIPAA requirements, but if it's recorded, you know, they could be recorded. Any of those things could potentially create problems. So that is generally the case. On the other hand, I will tell you that we just completed, you might have heard of it, was the Cox versus DSHS lawsuit that just wrapped up in Pierce County. We had started supporting that trial 4 months ago, the longest break in Pierce County trial history. 4 months is a long time. And what we ended up doing there was it was basically put on hold for 4 months, and then they just went back because the verdict came out last week, and that was a $100 million verdict in favor of the parents, the grandparents of the kids, and Susan Cox Powell's parents. And so that was great. And the way that they did that was interesting. Most of the trials that we've done, they've tried to keep the jury somewhat remote and then bring the witnesses one at a time. So what they did is they basically made it so that there were no witnesses coming to the court. The attorneys and the judge and the court reporter were separated, and then they used the entire galley for the juries, and they spaced them quite far out. And that was extremely, extremely helpful. Our job was not only what we normally do, which was helping one side or the other. We get retained as an advocate, and there we would do trial presentation. In this case, what we did was the court asked us to also support the court because they needed that, frankly. And so our job was to bring in every single witness remotely, which again, not super difficult. But when you think about the fact that that witness who's coming in remotely had to be seen by the jury in the galley, the judge, the attorneys, and had to be able to interact with exhibits and not just show them like we do in screen sharing, to actually have them, you know, identify by highlighting things and circling things the way you would in a court, and you'd mark that as an exhibit. So all of that had to happen remotely. And so it was a very interesting case. I will tell you that King County, in order to do that, something similar, because they have so many more trials and everything else, is if anybody's ever been to Bellevue recently and driven by Maidenbower Center, you'll notice that the main sign on Maidenbower Center says King County Superior Court. And all they're doing there is using it for voir dire or jury selection, because it gives them room to spread folks out. And frankly, it's great because the convention centers and folks like that are just struggling.
Right.
And so this gives them a revenue flow.
Super. So David Bovanek asks, do you have thoughts to share about what might best serve our members if we start to be able to return? Is there a good hybrid solution where you're starting to meet face-to-face again, but you're still leveraging Zoom for people that are still concerned about COVID and wanting to maintain distance? Any thoughts?
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that across lots of organizations. They're at least starting to think about that. So clearly one of the things, organizations right now have moved to fully hybrid, or sorry, fully virtual models. Particularly the ones that have had time, like the National Speakers Association conference, everyone was remote. We do have a streaming studio downtown across the street from the Amazon headquarters, but even there, we've been very limited in it. I will tell you that one of our members who was an early adopter of virtual conferences, but also did what I would consider at least a partial hybrid model, was the wonderful Beth Knox through the Washington Festival and Events Association. That particular conference was scheduled to go live in Bellevue on Monday at an in-person, fully in-person conference. And on Friday, the governor announced the stay-at-home order. So I don't think, and Beth, I know she's still on here, she might be sticking her tongue out at me, but literally 72, and I say we had 72 hours, they had 72 hours to get the entire conference flipped from in-person in Bellevue to hybrid, to the extent we had some of the leaders in the studio, so it could still have that really somebody to manage all the pieces, but keeping people at a distance.
Well, Beth is still out there and she's curious. Many fundraiser events have moved to a virtual format. How do you think these events will evolve in the future once we have a vaccine and we're able to sort of meet in person?
I would say a lot of people love fundraisers. They enjoy it. They like getting dressed up. They like seeing their friends and people they maybe haven't seen in a year. That's what's always my thing, is I saw people I hadn't seen forever. I think that they're going to be effective, and I think people are going to continue to adopt and use hybrid models, because, as again, with a lawyer, people who would have driven a long distance to get there or flown, will now see that they have an alternative. There's some interesting things that have been done in that area. We're done work with, we're doing an educational program with the Washington Women's Foundation later in the year. We're doing work with our good friend Charlotte, which is very interesting too, because the barriers for geography are gone. We're able to service them completely from here. But we're trying to come up with creative things. So one of the things was with the National Speakers Association, we had a lunchtime digital dine around. Because people normally, so people had tables. In this case, there were breakout rooms renamed as tables. But you had if you had 10 people at a table, you had 2 people there. We had a list of where people were, and then people could literally go to a table for a little while, talk to the people they wanted to, eat if they wanted to, and then come back into the main room and go to one of the other tables, just like you would at a regular conference, right? You're here, I see my friend over there, I want to go talk to him, then I'm going to go over there. Really recreating that as much as possible. One of the things that we're trying to do is how do you increase the amount of revenue? And so one of the things we've done is things like setting up a VIP room that has special access to get into it, that has a sponsor. So you can sell a higher level VIP ticket, sponsorship, even to the extent that we're looking at using that room. Because one of the problems with live events like this is the speakers don't get feedback. Right? It was really weird doing this presentation. I haven't done one myself like this. And I think I'm funny, but I couldn't tell that anybody's laughing. And so it's a very kind of a dead presentation from a speaker perspective. We don't know. So the idea would be that VIP room would serve as our focus group as well. And then we would have the ability, because we have laugh tracks and we have claps and we have all of that, that in a real event, everybody is going to be exhibiting. But certainly we don't want to build that in, because it could fall flat, right? If we have that VIP group and that focus group, now if they're laughing, we can hit the laugh track. And so then the speaker gets the feedback, everyone else gets the feedback. If they're applauding, we can send that, and everybody gets that shared experience. Now, it's a sample size, but it helps get everybody into that mood.
So let me pause you right there. Caroline, Mariah, take a memo. I'd like a applause and laugh track for my next leadership of the Zoom call coming up. A quick question from Virginia McKenzie. She's asking if you've heard of a Whova, W-H-O-V-A. It's an app for 100% virtual conferences. She gives it a thumbs up. Has that crossed your radar yet?
It has not, primarily because we really have tried to build with the technology we have, and we don't always use just Zoom. I know that's the one I talked about. Most people are familiar with it. But for example, that big NSA conference, we used YouTube, we used Vimeo, we used Zoom. I mean, we had tons of moving parts, each one different. The tech room, the green room, the main event, the red carpet is, if you're interested, go to the National Speakers Association and look up their Influence 2020. You can see they even did a red carpet. We had a gala. We had a gala the closing night. You know,
Wow.
who would think you could do that?
That's very cool. Well, you sort of anticipated my last question, and that's kind of just from my perspective, you know, technology sort of repeats itself in cycles, right? And we've got this proliferation of different video conferencing tools, and yet the idea of interoperability. So if I get used to using my Zoom client, can I join a conference with my client on some sort of level of interoperability? Any thoughts on that? It seems like it would be several years away at best.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a challenge, right? Because right now, if you have just a personal account and you're not paying for a Zoom account, you have that limits on participants and time. You know, the trick is you got to be careful because both Brian, my husband, and I both had our own pro level Zoom accounts just so we can invite more than, you know, one or two other people, and we don't want to be subject to that 40-minute issue when we're talking to family and folks. The problem with that is that we're so busy at work that the company is now stealing our Zoom accounts to use for other events. I don't think they're reimbursing us for it, but yeah, we've been so busy, and we did the same thing. We took all our employees and said, "Who's got a pro account?" So I urge you to be cautious, Jeff. You could end up having more value than you want.
Exactly. Well, hey, Steve, you've been funny, you've been informative. This has been a great session. Really want to thank you for the time and effort you put into sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today. And testing our membership skills. If you want to go out and click the applause button or the thumbs up button and show Steve some love, I'm sure he'd appreciate it. But Steve, nice job, great long presentation. Thanks for doing that.
Thank you.